What's up, everybody? I'm here to give you my thoughts on both the men and women's NCAA brackets, and we've got quite a list here, so this might be the longest one I have, so longest video I should say, so be prepared. But I think as chivalry goes, we should go with the ladies first. So let's go with the ladies in their seeding of 64, if you will. So let's go with the ladies here. The ladies in what is known as the well, you know what's funny is what's different between the men and the ladies is that the ladies, their regions are not by, direction, are not named by direction like north, south, east, west, or midwest or mideast, or whatever you want to call it. Instead, we got the region done by the city name in which it's going to host the regional games, like the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, stuff like that. Well, anyway, let's take a look at what we have here, folks. With the ladies, the women's bracket, we got number one, which the women's bracket starts on the 17th, which will be this March. Well, not March, but this Saturday. So the women's bracket starts this Saturday. So let's take a look at what we got. Des Moines region. So Schleg Daddy, you want to go see a basketball game? You got one upcoming real soon. And that'll be between the 24th and 25th. So check that out. As well, actually the 24th to the 27th. So Schleg Daddy Off the Rope Show, you can check that out if you want to. But anyway, let's get into what I'm talking about. The first match, Baylor UC Santa Barbara. Baylor advances on. They will face Ohio, the winner of Ohio State, Florida. I say Florida. So that would be Baylor's opponent in the second round. Georgetown, Fresno State. I'll go with Georgetown. Georgia Tech, Sacred Heart. Georgia Tech. There's your other second round. Nebraska, Kansas. That's right. The Lady Jayhawks and the Lady Cornhuskers. A rematch of Big 12 opponents, Big 12 rivals. Even though both are in different conferences now. But as much as I like the Lady Jayhawks, I gotta go with the Cornhuskers here. So Nebraska moves on. Lady Cornhuskers move on. Their opponents will be Delaware. Then DePaul, BYU. I go with BYU. And then Tennessee, University of Tennessee Martin. Of course, Tennessee moves on there. And then moving on to the Sweet 16 for the ladies. We got Baylor moving on. We've got Georgetown moving on. We've got Nebraska moving on. And we got Tennessee moving on. And then in the Elite 8 of the Des Moines region, the representative from the Des Moines region in the Elite 8, the two last teams in the Des Moines region for the Elite 8 will be Baylor, Tennessee. And I think it will be Tennessee that upsets Baylor. Even though Baylor's undefeated, I think Tennessee pulls it out. Tennessee goes to the ladies' Final Four in Denver as the Des Moines region champion. Then the Fresno region. Stanford, Hampton, Stanford of course. West Virginia, Texas. I will go with Texas to pull the upset. South Carolina, Eastern Michigan, I will go with South Carolina. Purdue, South Dakota State, I go with Purdue. Oklahoma, Michigan, I go with Oklahoma. St. John's, New York, and Creighton, I go with St. John's, New York. Vanderbilt, Middle Tennessee State, I go with Vanderbilt. And Duke and Samford, I go with Duke. Then moving on to the Sweet 16, I have Stanford moving on. That's right, I have Stanford beating Texas. I have Purdue beating South Carolina, setting up a Purdue Stanford Sweet 16. I have Oklahoma beating St. John's, and I have Duke beating Vanderbilt, setting up Oklahoma Duke. Then I have Stanford beating Purdue, and I have Duke defeating Oklahoma, and I have Stanford beating Duke in the Elite Eight of the Fresno region, and that will make it Stanford. In fact, let me get a pen right here. Then I'll make it Stanford against Tennessee. So the Lady Cardinal against the Lady Vols in the first Final Four matchup. Then we go to the Raleigh region, Raleigh, North Carolina region. Notre Dame against Liberty, Notre Dame. California and Iowa, I go with the Lady Bears. That sets up Notre Dame Cal. St. Bonaventure against Florida Gulf Coast. I go with St. Bonaventure to move on. Georgia and Marist, I go with Georgia. Arkansas, Dayton, I go with Arkansas. Texas A&M, Albany, New York, I go with Texas A&M. Louisville, Michigan State, I go with Louisville. Maryland Navy, I go with Maryland. Then Notre Dame and Cal, as much as I would like to see Cal beat Notre Dame, I got to go with the Lady Irish. St. Bonaventure against Georgia, got to go with Georgia. Setting up Irish Bulldog matchup in the Sweet 16. Arkansas, Texas A&M, I'm going with the Aggies. That's right, I'm going with the Lady Aggies. Louisville, Maryland, I go with Louisville. That sets up to pull the upset. Louisville to pull the upset. That sets up Lady Aggies, Lady Cardinals. Then I have Notre Dame beating Georgia, and I have Texas A&M beating Louisville. If I'm right here. Yeah. And that sets up Notre Dame and Texas A&M. Notre Dame moves on to the Final Four as the Raleigh region champions. Then the Kingston region. We have the Kingston region here. Number 1, Connecticut moves on, beats Prairie View. Kansas State, Lady Wildcats all the way in this game against Princeton. Lady Wildcats beat Princeton. So that sets up Connecticut, Kansas State. LSU against San Diego State, I go with the Lady Tigers. Penn State, UTEP, I go with the Lady Nittlions, if you will. Rutgers, Gonzaga, I go with the Lady Scarlet Knights. Miami against Idaho State, I go with the Lady Hurricanes. Green Bay against Iowa State, I'm going with the Lady Cyclones to upset Green Bay. And Kentucky, McNeese State, I go with the Lady Wildcats to win there. And then Connecticut against Kansas State. As much as I would love to see the Lady Wildcats beat the Lady Huskies, I gotta go with UConn. LSU, Penn State, sounds like a good one. I go with Penn State. Rutgers, Miami, I go with the Lady Hurricanes. Iowa State, Kentucky, I go with Kentucky. And then I have Connecticut beating the Lady Nittany Lions. That's right, the UConn Lady Huskies move on to the Elite Eight, and they will face the Lady Wildcats of Kentucky. That's right, they will face the Lady Wildcats, who will get past the Lady Hurricanes. And then that sets up a good one, I believe. One would probably be the best match in the ladies bracket of overall the ladies tournament. But I'm gonna go with Kentucky. That's right, the Lady Wildcats of Kentucky moving on to the Final Four in Denver. Alright. So, for my women's, as you can see right there, that's what it says, women's Final Four. You can see that right there. Let me pull that away a little bit. The ladies or women's Final Four for 2012, in my prediction, will be Tennessee, Stanford, Notre Dame, Kentucky. Now, national championship game. Who do I think gets it? Well, I may sound biased here, but I think Stanford will roll into the national championship game. That's right, the Lady Cardinals will move into the championship game. And they will face, are you ready for this? As much as I love the Irish, and it'd be the luck of the Irish, you might say. But nope. I'm going with the Lady Wildcats of Kentucky. That's right. I'm going Stanford, Kentucky Women's National Championship game with Stanford bringing the title home. So that is my prediction for the women's NCAA tournament. Again, my Final Four teams: Tennessee against Stanford, Notre Dame against Kentucky, national championship Stanford, Kentucky, with Stanford winning the national title, winning the whole enchilada, baby. So there's that. Now we get down to business, as some people would say. Major business. The men's NCAA bracket. The bracket, as some people will look at it. The men's, which started last night, if you will, with the first round matchups, the first four, the first 4 games continuing tonight. We know that Western Kentucky and BYU have moved on. Western Kentucky will take on Kentucky, and BYU will take on Florida. No, not Florida, but Marquette. I'm sorry about that. So now, we just got to wait to see who Lamar and Vermont will face. The winner of that will face North Carolina. And then also later tonight, we got California, South Florida. The winner of that, I'm trying to find it here, will face Temple. That seems interesting. And that's the one thing I don't get. If you're going to do 68 teams, just do it. Go 68. I mean, okay, you have to add, what, one more seed? I mean, what is this, 2 more seeds to each? So you have a 68 against a, you have an 18 against a 1, so what? I don't understand it. Well, anyway, let's take a look at who's going to move on here. Kentucky, of course, is going to move on to the third round, as it's called here. That's the difference between the men and the women. Kentucky's going to move on to the third round. They will face UConn. That's right. I think UConn's going to beat Iowa State. As much as I'm a Big 12 person, because I lived in Kansas for a while, I think UConn's going to beat Iowa State. I think they want it more, and that's going to set up a third round matchup of what I'm already predicting to be the Kingston Region Championship match in the women's thing. So third round matchup is going to be in the men's division, UConn and Kentucky out of the South region. This is the South region I'm starting with. So Kentucky and UConn will meet in the second round. Wichita State, VCU. I'm going with the Shockers to continue shocking on. Indiana, New Mexico State. I got to go with Indiana. There's no doubt about that. So you got Wichita State, Indiana. UNLV, Colorado. I'm going to go with Colorado to make the upset. Colorado in the first year in the tournament as a Pac-12 representative. I'm going to go with Colorado to pull the upset over UNLV. Baylor, South Dakota State. Baylor, of course. Notre Dame, Xavier. I'm going to go with the Irish. And Duke and Lehigh. Got to go with Duke, of course. So then moving on to the Sweet 16, if you will. I've got Kentucky beating UConn. This is the upset. Here's one of my upsets. I've got Wichita State beating Indiana. That's right, I do. I got Wichita State beating Indiana, so that will set up Wichita State, Kentucky in the Sweet 16. Then I got Colorado continuing to upset people. I believe Colorado is going to give it a close game. But no, they're not going to continue upsetting people now that I think about it. So I got to go with Baylor. So Baylor will beat Colorado in a rematch of former Big 12 rivals. And Baylor, by doing so, will face Notre Dame. That's right, I believe Notre Dame is going to upset Duke. And it will make Baylor, Notre Dame is another Sweet 16 matchup in the South. Then in the Elite 8, I got to go with Kentucky. Unfortunately, Wichita State's run will end against Kentucky. And they will face Duke in the Elite 8 of the South region. And I have, are you ready for this? Duke, surprise, surprise, moving on to the Final Four. As the South region champions, I have Duke beating Kentucky to claim the South region. Now we move on to the West region. I feel Duke's going to meet the winner of the West region. Number 1, Michigan State against LIU, Long Island University, Brooklyn. I got Michigan State, of course. Memphis and St. Louis, go with Memphis. New Mexico, Long Beach State. I'm going with New Mexico. Louisville, Davidson. I got a feeling that's going to be a close matchup. I got to go with Louisville. Murray State, Colorado State. Got to go with Murray State because they've been on a roll except for that one loss. Marquette, BYU. I'm going with BYU over Marquette. That's right, I'm going with BYU over Marquette. Florida, Virginia. I'm going with Virginia. And Missouri against Norfolk State, Missouri. Then Michigan State will beat Memphis. It'll be a close game in the third round, but Memphis will lose to Michigan State. New Mexico, Louisville. Louisville is going to beat New Mexico. I believe it. BYU, Murray State. BYU continues to upset. I feel BYU will beat Murray State. Virginia, Missouri. I go with Missouri. So, what does that set up here? Michigan State, Louisville in the Sweet 16. Michigan State. What is that set up here? BYU, Missouri in the Sweet 16. I love the Tigers. No, really I don't, but I'm a fan. They're Big 12s right now still until next year. So I really don't like the Tigers, but I am a fan since they are Big 12 representatives last year though. But I'm going with BYU to upset the Tigers. That's right. This 14th seeded BYU beating the Tigers. And what does that set up? Of course, that sets up in the Elite Eight, BYU, Michigan State. Michigan State ends BYU's run, which means Michigan State wins the West region, and they will face Duke in the Final Four. So yeah, Michigan State will face Duke in the first Final Four matchup. And then we go to the East region. The East region. Syracuse will beat UNC Asheville, and they will face Kansas State. Vanderbilt will beat Harvard. Yes, Harvard, first time they've been in it for a while, but enjoy it while you can, Crimson, because down you go. Wisconsin against Montana. I'm going with Wisconsin. Cincinnati, Texas. Texas beats Cincinnati. There's one upset, according to the seeds. Florida State, St. Bonaventure, whatever it's called. Got to go with Florida State, of course. Gonzaga, West Virginia. Going with Gonzaga. Ohio State, Lahora, Maryland. Ohio State. Syracuse and Kansas State. Oh, as much as I would love to see the Wildcats upset the Orangemen, I got to go with Syracuse. I'm sorry. I mean, I would love to see Kansas State move on, but I got to go with the Orangemen. It's, you know, to me, it would be great for Kansas State to win, but I just don't see it happening, especially being in the East region. Then Vanderbilt, Wisconsin. I'm going with Vanderbilt to beat Wisconsin. Texas against Florida State. I'm continually going to go with Texas to beat Florida State. And then I'm going to go with Gonzaga upsetting Ohio State. So your Sweet 16 out of the East will be Syracuse, Vanderbilt, Texas, Gonzaga. Then going to the Elite Eight, I believe it's going to be Syracuse, and I believe it's going to be Gonzaga. That's what I feel. And Gonzaga being a West team, a lot of people want to look at it from a biased standpoint, saying they don't stand a chance. But you know what? I'm going with the first major upset, and it might be the only one I'm wrong about. But I'm going with Gonzaga. Trying to make sure I get everything right here. Yep. I'm going with Gonzaga. I've got to go with Gonzaga. I just have a feeling about it. Even though some people say they'll be gone in the first round, I don't think so. And then finally we finally get to the Midwest region. North Carolina, of course, is going to beat whoever wins tonight between Lamar and Vermont. I don't even know why they continuously do that. Creighton in Alabama. I'm going with the Crimson Tide to beat Creighton. Temple against California, South Florida winner. Seriously, you want to put Temple against the winner of this match tonight? Of this game tonight? That's like saying, Temple, get ready to meet your suicide. It's like saying, Temple, get ready to go into a suicide game. You want to talk about overrating seeding-wise? Temple got it. Cal is going to beat South Florida tonight. I feel it. And Cal will beat Temple. Then you got Michigan, Ohio. Michigan, of course. San Diego State, North Carolina State. You got to go with the Aztecs here. They're on a roll. Georgetown, Belmont. You got to go with Georgetown. St. Mary's, Purdue. I'm going with St. Mary's. And then, of course, Kansas, Detroit. You got to go with Kansas. Then North Carolina will beat Alabama. And I believe Cal is going to continue running. If I'm wrong after tonight, then I'm wrong. But I feel Cal, or even South Florida. Let's just put it that way. Cal or South Florida, whoever beats Temple will continue their run, and they will beat Michigan. Then San Diego State and Georgetown. I believe Georgetown is going to beat San Diego State. Kansas is going to have a tough one with St. Mary's, but I feel Kansas, of course, is going to move on. Then, North Carolina, I'm afraid, is going to end either Cal or South Florida's run. Kansas and Georgetown, they're going to have a great match in the Sweet 16, but I'm going with KU. And then in the Elite 8 game for the Midwest Region title, I feel we're going to have a great match. It's going to be very close in scoring. I'm going with the Jayhawks. Some people may say, but Brian, people like you always pick the Jayhawks. Yeah, they get far, but then they lose. They got an easier path except for North Carolina. It's going to be a to me, it's going to be a 1 or 2 point game and a 2.1 or 2 point win for these guys. So I feel KU moves on. So my Final Four, on one side, Duke, Michigan State. On the other side, Gonzaga, KU. But now, who goes to the national championship? Well, that's where things are going to get a little irate. But both games I feel are going to be good. Definitely. Both games, all four teams got great offenses and defenses. There's no doubt about that. If we want to look at it from a more technical, detailed standpoint. But here's my national championship game. Duke and KU. You're going to have the Blue Devils and the Jayhawks facing each other once again in the national championship. But now, the decision: who wins? Who takes it all in the Superdome? Who walks out with the big enchilada? Who will pave the way, set the bar for the women to break the following night? Well, as much as I'd love to see Kansas move on, as much as I'd love to see it, I've got a feeling it's going to be very, very close. But forgive me when I say this, Lord. And KU fans, please forgive me. I gotta go with Duke. I'm sorry, I gotta go with Duke. I mean, they haven't, I don't know when they last won it, but you gotta go with Duke on this one. And that is my NCAA bracket picks, at least when it comes to the Final Four teams in the national championship. You got to go with these two teams. So you got to go with these four teams that I mentioned. In my heart, I feel have more of a better shot at giving us great matchups. So on one side, the South Region champion will be Duke, and they will face the West Region champion Michigan State. Duke moves on to the national title. Then on the other side, the East Region champion Gonzaga, I feel is going to be the Cinderella of this, will face KU, who will be the Midwest champions. But KU moves on, and what will be a very close game, named the day after WrestleMania, of course, ironically, Duke beats KU. And it's going to be very close. So, what does this mean? That means Lady Cardinals of Stanford will bring home the title, and the Blue Devils will bring home the titles for Duke. And those are my brackets on both the men and women's sides. I haven't filled out all the other ones. I will cross out any teams that I get wrong. I'm sure I won't be the only one though. So leave your comments down below, video response if you like, and I will talk to you all later.